What would you do if the doctor looked you in the eyes and told you the person you have loved for 28 years has exactly 4 months left to live? Not 4 years, not 4 decades. 4 months. Would you run? Would you break? Would you fall to your knees on a cold hospital floor in Toronto, Canada, in the middle of winter, and ask why this would happen to two people who had given so much of themselves to each other and to everyone around them? Christopher Adler did all of those things, but then he got up. And what happened next, on a quiet street bench in Mississauga, Ontario, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, is something this story will carry with you long after it ends. Stay with me, because this story is completely true. Who they were before the storm they met in 1994 at a small church in Brampton, Ontario. Christopher was 22 years old, a broad-shouldered young man with calloused hands and a warm smile. Isabella was 20 years old, a quiet young woman who carried her Bible in one hand and her laughter in the other. Their love was not the kind you see in movies, loud and dramatic and full of grand gestures. Their love was the quiet kind, the kind that shows up, the kind that stays. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony with 40 guests and a borrowed dress. Christopher made his vows without notes because, as he later said, "I didn't need to write it down. She was already written on my heart." For 28 years, they built a life in a modest home in Mississauga, Ontario, a white-framed house on Clearwater Crescent with a small garden Isabella tended every spring. She grew tomatoes, lavender, and sunflowers, always sunflowers, because she said they were the only flowers that had the courage to face the sun directly. They had no children, not for lack of wanting, but after years of hoping and praying and 2 heartbreaking losses, they made peace with where life had taken them. They turned their love inward into each other and outward into their community. Christopher worked in construction for 15 years, then took jobs wherever he could, part-time delivery driver, warehouse shifts, weekend maintenance work. Isabella taught 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary for over 2 decades. Her students called her Miss Bella. She kept cookies in her desk drawer. She stayed after school for children whose parents came late. She was the kind of teacher communities are built around. Their house was small but full of books, full of gospel music on Sunday mornings, full of the smell of Isabella's jollof rice and Christopher's earnest but imperfect attempts at baking, full of a love that had been tested and refined over decades, until it became something close to sacred. They were not wealthy people, but they had everything that cannot be purchased. The diagnosis then, in the spring of 2021, Isabella found a lump. She didn't tell Christopher for 3 weeks. She didn't want to worry him. That was Isabella, always trying to protect everyone else from pain, even when the pain was inside her own body. When she finally told him, Christopher sat very still for a long moment. Then he took her hands in both of his, those big calloused hands, and he said 4 words: "We will face this, not you will face this, we." The diagnosis came in the summer of 2021. Breast cancer, stage 2, which felt like a door left slightly open. There was hope. There was a path forward. Christopher rearranged his entire life around that path. Every single appointment, and there were dozens, Christopher was there. He sat in those hard plastic hospital chairs at Toronto General with a notebook, writing down every word Dr. Priyanaya said. He learned the names of every medication. He learned the side effects. He learned what foods helped and what foods harmed. He became, in every practical sense, Isabella's second doctor. Nurse Sandra, who attended to Isabella regularly, later said, "In 20 years of nursing, I have never seen a husband show up the way that man showed up. He never complained. He never checked his phone when she was speaking. He always held her hand during the hard parts. The weight of the bills, but love does not pay hospital bills. And in Canada, while the public health system covers much, the specialist treatments, the experimental therapies, the medications not yet covered under provincial plans, they cost money, real money. Money Christopher and Isabella did not have. Christopher took on extra shifts. He drove delivery from 5 a.m. until noon, then worked his part-time warehouse job until 8 p.m. He came home exhausted, hands cracked, back aching, and still made Isabella her evening tea and sat beside her and asked how she was feeling. Isabella, watching him slowly wear himself down for her, would cry quietly when he left the room. She wrote in her journal, which was found much later, "I am so grateful for this man, and I am so ashamed that I am the reason his knees hurt and his eyes are tired. He deserves rest, but he will never accept that. He will never leave. And God forgive me, I am glad." By the end of 2022, the bills had grown beyond what they could manage. The cancer had progressed to stage 3. The treatments were more aggressive. The costs were higher. Christopher did the math one night at the kitchen table. Papers spread everywhere, a cold cup of coffee beside him. And when he finished, he sat back and closed his eyes. The numbers didn't work. They simply didn't work. He and Isabella talked all night, sitting across from each other at that same kitchen table, where they had shared 1,000 meals, 1,000 conversations, 1,000 small ordinary moments that now felt unbearably precious. By morning, they had made their decision. They would sell the house on Clearwater Crescent, the white-framed house with the small garden and the sunflowers. The house where they had spent 23 years of marriage. The house that was the only permanent thing left in a life that was becoming less permanent by the day. Isabella touched the kitchen wall before they handed over the keys, just placed her palm flat against the paint, the wall she had leaned against while cooking, while laughing on the phone, while crying in the dark when she thought Christopher was asleep. She didn't say anything. She just touched the wall, and Christopher, standing behind her, put his hand over hers. They moved into a small rented apartment in East Mississauga, 2 rooms, a window that faced a parking lot, but they had each other and they had their faith. And for a time, a brief, fragile time, it was almost enough. February 2024, Tuesday, Dr. Priya Nair sat across from Christopher and Isabella in her office and spoke in the careful, precise way that doctors speak when they are delivering news that will permanently divide a life into before and after. The cancer had reached stage 4. It had spread. And in Dr. Nair's professional estimation, based on everything she knew, everything she had seen, Isabella had approximately 4 months to live. Christopher heard the words. He understood the words. And then something in him, some deep structural part of who he was, cracked open like ice on a spring river. He did not cry in the office. He held Isabella's hand, and he nodded, and he asked the right questions, and he wrote in his notebook. But in the hospital bathroom afterwards, that cold, fluorescent, anonymous bathroom, he slid down the wall and he wept in a way he had never wept in his life. Not at his mother's funeral, not at the losses, never like this. Because this was different, this was a number. 4 months, a countdown, a clock that had already started ticking. What does a person do with that knowledge? What do you do on a Wednesday morning when you know that by June, the person sleeping beside you, the person whose breathing you know better than your own, will no longer be there? Christopher did what he had always done. He got up, he made breakfast. He helped Isabella with her compression stockings because the cancer and the medications had caused severe swelling in her legs, swollen, painful, heavy. He tied her shoes, he kissed her forehead, and he said, as he always said, "We will face this." Isabella, for her part, was remarkable. She was the one who comforted him. She was the one who said, "Christopher, I have had 28 years with you. God has been so good to me. Do not grieve for me. Be grateful with me." She asked only one thing. She had heard about a specialized treatment program at a private oncology center in Toronto, a newer protocol that had shown meaningful results in stage 4 cases. It wasn't a guarantee. Nothing was a guarantee, but it was a door, and Isabella, who had spent her whole life believing that as long as a door exists, you walk toward it, wanted to try. The cost was beyond anything they had left. Their house was already gone. Their savings were gone. They were barely keeping the apartment. But they held hands and they prayed, and Christopher said, "Then we will trust God to open a way where there is no way." The bench on Hurontario Street, 3 days later, on a grey Friday afternoon, they went out together to get Isabella a proper compression stocking for her swollen leg. A simple errand, an ordinary errand. He was sitting on a wooden bench outside the pharmacy on Hurontario Street. He appeared to be in his late 60s. His coat was worn, his shoes were old. He was struggling, visibly, painfully struggling, to get to his feet, reaching for a bag on the ground and unable to manage it, his legs seemingly giving way beneath him. Most people walked past. This is not a judgment, it is simply what happened. People were busy. People had their own lives. Christopher Adler, who was carrying more pain than most people will ever know, stopped. He handed Isabella his bag. He walked to the bench. He bent down and helped the man, this struggling stranger, to his feet. He picked up the man's bag. He steadied him. He asked where he was going. And when the man said he was trying to reach the bus stop, Christopher walked him there. The man looked at him for a long moment and then asked, "Why did you stop? Why did you help me?" And Christopher said, without hesitation, without performance, simply and honestly the way he had always spoken, "Because everyone needs help in this life. No one should struggle alone." The man looked past Christopher to Isabella, who was standing a few feet away, her leg wrapped, her frame thin, her eyes warm despite everything they carried. "Is that your wife?" Christopher said yes. The man said, "She does not look well," and something in Christopher, perhaps the exhaustion, perhaps the grace of being seen by a stranger with nothing to gain, broke open just slightly. His voice was unsteady when he answered. He said, "No, she is sick. The doctors have given her 4 months." His eyes filled. He took a breath. He turned to Isabella and said, "Come, my love. Let us go. We don't need to burden this man with our troubles." But the man held up a hand. He said, "Please, don't go. I would like to hear more." Gerald Whitmore, there are moments in life, small, quiet, seemingly ordinary moments, that are anything but ordinary. Christopher and Isabella would later say they felt something shift in that instant, something they couldn't name. They sat down on that bench, and Christopher, who had carried the weight of 2 lives largely in silence for years, began to speak. He told the man everything: the diagnosis, the stages, the house they sold, the apartment, the treatment they couldn't afford, the hope they were still, somehow against all logic, still holding on to. The man listened. He did not look away. He did not check his phone. He listened with complete attention. When Christopher finished, there was a long silence, and then the man said something that changed everything. "I must tell you the truth. I am not who I appear to be." His name was Gerald Whitmore. Gerald Whitmore was not struggling. Gerald Whitmore was a 71-year-old retired businessman from Burlington, Ontario, who had spent the last decade of his life doing one thing above all else: finding people of genuine character and genuine need and changing their lives. He had learned, after losing his wife to illness years before and inheriting more money than he knew what to do with, that wealth without purpose is just weight. And so he had made it his purpose, his calling, to go out into the world in ordinary clothes, on ordinary days, and find the people whose goodness far exceeded their circumstances. He had sat on that bench deliberately, struggling deliberately, waiting. Most people had walked past. Christopher Adler, a man carrying a terminal diagnosis, hospital debt, and a countdown clock, had stopped. Gerald looked at Christopher and Isabella and said, "You are exactly who I was looking for." What happened next? Within 2 weeks, Isabella Adler was enrolled in the specialized treatment program at the private oncology center in Toronto. Gerald Whitmore had covered the full cost, every treatment, every consultation, every medication. He had also called 2 of his closest friends, Marcus Webb, a retired property developer in Oakville, and Helen Forsyth, a former healthcare executive in Hamilton. And the 3 of them together arranged something Christopher and Isabella could not have imagined in even their most hopeful prayers. A home, a real home, a modest but well-kept house in Mississauga, not far from Clearwater Crescent, with a small garden in the back, furnished, prepared, ready. And in the driveway, a reliable used car, fully serviced and insured, so that Christopher would never again have to worry about how to get his wife to her appointments. When Gerald brought them to the house and opened the door, Christopher walked in and stood in the middle of the empty hallway and could not move. He just stood there, this strong man who had carried so much for so long, and he wept. Isabella walked past him into the kitchen. She ran her hand along the counter. She looked out the window at the garden, and there, in the corner of the garden, someone had planted sunflowers. She turned to Gerald, standing in the doorway, and she said, "How did you know?" He smiled. He said, "I didn't, but God did." The word hope. Isabella began treatment the following Monday. The next 4 months, the months that were supposed to be her last, she spent not dying, but fighting, and healing, and sitting in her new garden in the Ontario summer, watching her sunflowers grow. The treatment worked, not completely, not magically, but the tumor markers dropped. The spread slowed. Dr. Nair, at a follow-up appointment 6 months later, used a word she had been careful not to use before. She used the word hope, real hope, clinical hope, the kind written in numbers and scanned results and lab reports. Christopher sat in that same hard plastic chair where he had received the most difficult news of his life and received the most welcome news of his life. He looked at Isabella, she looked at him, and he took her hands, those same hands he had held for 28 years, and he brought them to his lips, and he said nothing, because after 28 years, some things don't need words. Where they are now, Christopher and Isabella Adler still live in that house in Mississauga. The sunflowers come back every summer. Gerald Whitmore comes for dinner 3 times a year. He sits at their table and eats Isabella's cooking and says it is the finest meal he has anywhere. Christopher still drives Isabella to her appointments. He still holds her hand during the hard parts. He still writes in his notebook. Though now, more often than not, what he writes are the words stable and improving and good news. They were asked once by a journalist who heard their story what had carried them through. Christopher answered first. He said, faith and her. Isabella answered second. She said, him. And the evidence that God sends help through unexpected places. Sometimes through old coats and park benches, and people willing to wait and see what kind of person you truly are. True love is not found in the easy seasons. It is forged in the hardest ones. And it survives not because it is perfect, but because it refuses to let go. This has been the story of Christopher and Isabella Adler, and it is completely, entirely true. Counselor advice. Before we close, I want to speak to you directly, not just as a storyteller, but as a marriage counselor. What Christopher and Isabella showed us is what I call covenant love, the kind of love that is not sustained by feelings alone, but by decision, by daily, deliberate, costly decision. Many people today step away from marriages when life becomes difficult, when money is tight, when health fails, when the romance fades under the weight of real life. Consider this carefully. The truest test of your love is not how you treat each other on your wedding day. It is how you treat each other on the most difficult day. On the Tuesday when the doctor delivers 4 months. On the night when the numbers don't work. On the morning when there is nothing left to give, and you give anyway. Christopher did not stay because life was easy. He stayed because love is a covenant, not a contract. A contract ends when the conditions are no longer favorable. A covenant holds, especially when the conditions are hardest. If you are in a difficult season in your marriage right now, here are 3 anchors worth holding on to. Anchor 1. Communicate through the pain, not around it. Christopher and Isabella talked all night before selling their home. They faced hard truths together. Silence can become a wall between 2 people who still deeply need each other. Anchor 2. Let your spouse see your vulnerability. Christopher wept in that hospital bathroom, and he also allowed himself to be seen by Isabella and by a stranger. Strength is not the absence of tears. Real strength is being willing to be seen in the hard moments. Anchor 3. Stay open-handed even when life has taken much from you. The event that changed the Adler's life happened because Christopher stopped for a stranger while carrying the heaviest burden of his own life. Generosity, even in scarcity, creates space for things we could not have arranged on our own. True love still exists. It is not loud. It is not glamorous. It sits in hard plastic hospital chairs. It ties compression stockings. It makes evening tea. It says every single day, we will face this together. Hold on to your person. Fight for your marriage. And never underestimate what faithful, patient, giving love can survive. God bless you. And thank you for watching.